The morning sun cast long shadows across the ancient stones of Windsor Castle as Queen Elizabeth stood at her private study window, watching the groundskeepers tend to the perfectly manicured gardens below. Her fingers traced the edge of an official document that had arrived just hours before, bearing news that would reshape the most significant royal funeral in decades. Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, had passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 99, leaving behind a legacy that spanned nearly 8 decades of devoted service to the crown. The news had spread like wildfire through the palace corridors, and within minutes, the intricate machinery of royal protocol had sprung into action. But this funeral would be unlike any other in the monarchy's long history. Lady Sarah Chatto, the Queen's niece and one of her most trusted confidants, knocked gently on the study door before entering. Her face bore the weight of both grief and the enormous responsibility that lay ahead. "Your Majesty," she began softly, "the palace communications team needs your final decision on the dress code for the Duke's funeral." The Queen turned from the window, her expression thoughtful yet resolute. At 95, she had witnessed countless state occasions, each steeped in centuries of tradition and pageantry. Military uniforms had always been the standard for male members of the royal family at such solemn events, their medals and insignia telling stories of service, honor, and dedication to the realm. "I've made my decision, Sarah," the Queen replied, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had defined her 7-decade reign. "There will be no military uniforms worn by any member of the royal family at Philip's funeral. We shall all wear civilian mourning dress." The announcement would send shockwaves through royal circles and beyond. For generations, the sight of princes and senior royals in their ceremonial military attire had been as much a part of royal funerals as the tolling of church bells and the playing of the last post. Prince Charles, Prince William, and Prince Harry all held significant military ranks and had served their country with distinction. Prince Andrew, despite his recent controversies, was a decorated war veteran who had fought in the Falklands conflict. Lady Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly, understanding immediately the implications of this unprecedented decision. "Your Majesty, the press will undoubtedly speculate about the reasons behind this choice. There will be questions about Prince Andrew's situation and about Prince Harry's status since stepping back from royal duties." The Queen moved to her desk, where photographs of Prince Philip in various military uniforms throughout his life were displayed. Her husband had served with distinction in the Royal Navy during World War II, commanding HMS Magpie and participating in crucial naval operations. His military career had been exemplary, and he had held numerous honorary military appointments throughout his life as Duke of Edinburgh. "Philip would have understood," the Queen said, picking up a photograph of the Duke in his naval uniform from their early married years. "He was always one to put family unity above personal recognition. This decision ensures that the focus remains on celebrating his life and service, rather than becoming mired in discussions about who can and cannot wear what." The decision was particularly significant given the complex dynamics within the royal family at that time. Prince Harry and his wife Meghan had recently given their explosive interview to Oprah Winfrey, in which they had made serious allegations about racism within the royal family and lack of support for Meghan's mental health struggles. The rift between Harry and his father Prince Charles, as well as his brother Prince William, had become painfully public. Meanwhile, Prince Andrew continued to face scrutiny over his association with Jeffrey Epstein and the serious allegations made against him by Virginia Giuffre. Although he had stepped back from public duties, questions about his role in any royal ceremony remained a constant source of media speculation and public debate. By requiring all male family members to wear civilian dress, the Queen was making a statement that transcended individual controversies and focused on the collective mourning of a beloved family patriarch. It was a masterstroke of diplomatic decision-making that would prevent uncomfortable comparisons or discussions about who deserved to wear their military honors and who did not. The palace communications team worked through the morning to craft the official statement that would be released to the media. Every word was carefully chosen to emphasize the personal nature of the decision while maintaining the dignity and respect due to the Duke's memory. The statement would need to address the unprecedented nature of the choice, while avoiding any suggestion that it was motivated by family conflicts or individual controversies. As news of the Queen's decision began to circulate among senior palace staff, reactions were mixed. Some saw it as a wise move that would help ensure the funeral remained focused on celebrating Prince Philip's life and achievements. Others worried that breaking with such a long-standing tradition might be seen as diminishing the military aspects of the Duke's legacy. The Duke of Edinburgh's military service had been a source of immense pride throughout his life. He had joined the Royal Navy in 1939 as an 18-year-old cadet and had served throughout World War II, showing exceptional courage and dedication. His service record included participation in the Allied invasion of Sicily and the Pacific Campaign against Japan. After the war, he had continued to serve until 1951, when he reluctantly gave up his naval career to support his wife's role as monarch. The Queen's decision would ensure that Prince Philip's funeral would be remembered for the man himself rather than the complex family dynamics that had dominated headlines in recent months. It was a choice that reflected her deep understanding of both royal protocol and human nature, recognizing that sometimes the most powerful statement is made not by what one chooses to display, but by what one chooses to set aside. Prince Charles stood in his private chambers at Clarence House, staring at the formal mourning suit that had been laid out for him by his valet. The black mourning coat and striped trousers represented a significant departure from the naval uniform he had expected to wear to honor his father's memory. As heir to the throne, and a man who had served in both the Royal Navy and Royal Air Force, Charles had anticipated wearing his Admiral of the Fleet uniform, complete with the medals and honors that marked his decades of service. The call from his private secretary had come early that morning, informing him of his mother's decision regarding the dress code for the Duke's funeral. Charles understood immediately the wisdom behind the choice, even as he felt a pang of disappointment. His father had always taken immense pride in his naval service, and Charles had wanted to honor that legacy by wearing his own naval dress uniform. "Sir, the palace has confirmed that all male members of the family will be in civilian dress," his private secretary, Clive Alderton, explained as he entered the room. Her Majesty felt it would best serve the dignity of the occasion and avoid any unnecessary distractions. Charles nodded slowly, his fingers tracing the edge of his mourning coat. At 72, he had spent his entire life preparing for moments like these, understanding that royal duty often meant setting aside personal preferences for the greater good. The decision would undoubtedly disappoint many who expected the traditional pageantry of a royal funeral, but it would also demonstrate the family's ability to adapt and prioritize unity over tradition when circumstances demanded it. At Kensington Palace, Prince William was having a similar conversation with his own staff. As a former RAF search and rescue pilot, William had earned his place in military ceremonies through actual service rather than merely ceremonial appointments. He had risked his life flying rescue missions in challenging conditions, and his military uniform carried the weight of genuine achievement and sacrifice. Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge, watched her husband's measured response to the news. "I think your grandmother has made the right choice," she said quietly. This way, the focus can remain on grandfather's life rather than becoming a media circus about family tensions. William appreciated his wife's perspective. The past months had been particularly challenging for the family, with Harry and Meghan's departure from royal duties and their subsequent interviews creating unprecedented strain on family relationships. The decision to forego military uniforms would prevent the media from creating divisive narratives about who stood where or who wore what during such a solemn occasion. Meanwhile, at his home in California, Prince Harry received the news through official palace channels rather than a personal family call. The distance between him and his family had grown even wider since the Oprah interview, and communication had become increasingly formal and limited. Harry had expected that his changed status within the royal family might affect his participation in the funeral arrangements, but he hadn't anticipated such a sweeping change to the traditional protocol. Harry's military service had been the defining experience of his young adult life. His 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan, where he had served as an Apache helicopter pilot, represented a period when he had found purpose and identity beyond his royal title. The uniform he had hoped to wear would have honored not just his own service, but the memory of the fallen soldiers he had served alongside and the veterans who continued to struggle with the aftermath of war. His wife, Meghan, now pregnant with their 2nd child, offered comfort as Harry processed the news. "Perhaps it's for the best," she suggested gently. "This way, there won't be any questions about protocol or status. Everyone will be equal in their grief." The decision was particularly complex regarding Prince Andrew, who had been effectively sidelined from public royal duties due to his association with Jeffrey Epstein and the serious allegations against him. Andrew had served with genuine distinction during the Falklands War, piloting helicopters in combat conditions and earning the respect of his fellow servicemen. His naval uniform would have been one of the most decorated at the funeral, telling a story of legitimate military achievement. However, Andrew's presence at any royal event had become a source of intense media scrutiny and public criticism. By requiring civilian dress for all family members, the Queen had effectively removed one more potential source of controversy from her husband's funeral. Andrew would attend as a grieving son rather than as a decorated war veteran, allowing the focus to remain on family mourning rather than individual controversies. The reaction among military communities was mixed. Many veterans expressed disappointment that the Duke's military legacy wouldn't be honored through the traditional display of family military service. Others understood the practical wisdom of avoiding potential controversies during such a solemn occasion. Retired Admiral Lord West, a former First Sea Lord, commented privately to colleagues that while he respected the Queen's decision, it represented a significant break with naval tradition. The Duke was immensely proud of his naval service, he observed, but Her Majesty clearly felt that family unity trumped military tradition in this instance. The decision also affected the broader question of how the funeral would honor Prince Philip's military legacy. Palace planners worked to ensure that while the family would be in civilian dress, the ceremony itself would still include appropriate military honors. The Duke's naval cap and sword would be placed on his coffin, and military personnel would play crucial roles in the procession and service. The Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme, which had been Philip's greatest civilian legacy, would also be prominently featured in the service. The decision to prioritize civilian dress seemed to acknowledge that while Philip's military service had been important, his broader contributions to British society and the Commonwealth had been equally significant. As the day of the funeral approached, the unprecedented nature of the Queen's decision began to generate significant media coverage. Royal commentators debated the implications, with some praising the wisdom of prioritizing family unity, while others lamented the break with tradition. The decision ultimately reflected the Queen's deep understanding of her role as both monarch and family matriarch. In choosing civilian dress for the funeral, she had demonstrated that even the most established traditions could be adapted when circumstances demanded it, and that sometimes the most powerful tribute to a military man's legacy is the family unity he helped create and maintain throughout his life. The global media response to the Queen's announcement was immediate and intense. Within hours of the palace's official statement, news organizations across the world were analyzing the unprecedented decision and its implications for both the royal family and the centuries-old traditions surrounding royal funerals. In newsrooms from London to New York, from Sydney to Tokyo, royal correspondents and constitutional experts were being called upon to explain the significance of this departure from protocol. The decision was being viewed as far more than a simple change in dress code. It was seen as a reflection of the monarchy's ability to adapt to modern circumstances while navigating complex family dynamics. Jenny Bond, former BBC royal correspondent, found herself fielding calls from news programs around the world. "In all my years covering the royal family," she explained to a producer at CNN, I've never seen such a dramatic departure from military tradition at a royal funeral. This isn't just about clothing. It's about the Queen making a statement about family unity and ensuring that her husband's farewell isn't overshadowed by controversy. The reaction from the British public was notably divided. Traditional monarchists expressed disappointment that the pageantry and military splendor traditionally associated with royal funerals would be diminished. Many had looked forward to seeing the princes in their dress uniforms, viewing such displays as an important reminder of the royal family's connection to the armed forces and their role in national defense. Margaret Thompson, a 78-year-old retired teacher from Surrey, voiced the concerns of many older royal watchers. Prince Philip served his country with such distinction during the war, she told a local television reporter. It seems wrong that his sons and grandsons can't honor that service by wearing their own uniforms. These traditions exist for a reason. However, younger members of the public and many royal watchers appreciated the Queen's pragmatic approach. Social media platforms buzzed with discussions about the decision, with many praising the monarch for prioritizing substance over spectacle during a time of genuine family grief. The international perspective was particularly interesting as four media outlets examined the decision through the lens of their own cultural understanding of monarchy and tradition. European royal families, many of which had faced their own modernization challenges, watched with keen interest to see how the British monarchy handled this delicate balance between tradition and contemporary reality. King Carl XVI Gustav of Sweden, whose own family had navigated various scandals and controversies over the years, privately expressed admiration for Queen Elizabeth's handling of the situation. Through diplomatic channels, he conveyed his respect for her decision to prioritize family dignity over traditional protocol. The decision also sparked broader discussions about the role of military service in royal identity. For centuries, military service had been seen as an essential component of royal duty, particularly for male members of the family. The sight of royals in military uniform served as a visual reminder of their connection to the nation's defense and their willingness to serve in roles beyond ceremonial duties. Prince Philip himself had embodied this tradition perfectly. His wartime service had been genuine and distinguished, earning him respect not just as a royal consort, but as a military veteran who had proved himself under fire. His naval career had been marked by competence and courage, qualities that had shaped his approach to royal duty throughout his life. The Duke's military service had begun when he was just 18 years old, joining the Royal Navy in 1939 as Europe stood on the brink of war. Unlike many aristocratic young men who might have sought safe positions away from combat, Philip had actively sought dangerous assignments. He had served on HMS Ramillies in the Indian Ocean, protecting convoys from Japanese attack, and later on HMS Valiant during the Allied invasion of Sicily. His most celebrated military moment had come during the Battle of Cape Matapan in 1941, when his ship HMS Valiant had engaged Italian naval forces in the Mediterranean. As a young sub-lieutenant, Philip had been responsible for operating the ship's searchlights, helping to illuminate enemy vessels for the British guns. The engagement had been a significant Allied victory, and Philip's role, though junior, had been carried out with skill and courage under intense enemy fire. These wartime experiences had shaped Philip's character and his approach to royal duty. He had never been one for empty ceremony or meaningless tradition. His military background had given him an appreciation for efficiency, purpose, and genuine achievement. In many ways, the Queen's decision to forego military uniforms at his funeral reflected his own practical approach to life. The media coverage also focused heavily on the implications for family relationships, particularly between Prince William and Prince Harry. The two brothers had barely spoken since Harry's departure from royal duties, and their body language at recent family gatherings had been the subject of intense scrutiny and speculation. Royal biographer Penny Junor observed in several interviews that the civilian dress code might actually help the brothers focus on their shared grief rather than their differences. When you remove the visual symbols of rank and status, she explained, you're left with two sons mourning their grandfather. That might be exactly what the family needs right now. The decision was also seen as particularly considerate toward Prince Harry, who had been stripped of his honorary military titles when he stepped back from royal duties. Had military uniforms been required, Harry would have been in the painful position of attending his grandfather's funeral without the military honors he had earned through his service in Afghanistan. This aspect of the Queen's decision demonstrated her deep understanding of family dynamics and her desire to spare her grandson additional humiliation during an already difficult time. Despite the pain caused by Harry and Meghan's departure and their subsequent interviews, the Queen's maternal instincts remained strong. The palace's official statement had been carefully crafted to emphasize the personal nature of the decision while avoiding any suggestion that it was motivated by family controversies. The statement read, "Members of the royal family will wear mourning dress as a mark of respect for the Duke of Edinburgh, and, in keeping with COVID-19 guidelines, this will be a ceremonial royal funeral rather than a state funeral." The mention of COVID-19 guidelines provided additional justification for the departure from tradition, as the pandemic had already required significant modifications to funeral planning. The guest list had been drastically reduced, social distancing requirements had changed seating arrangements, and many traditional elements had been altered or eliminated. As the funeral date approached, the focus gradually shifted from the controversy over military uniforms to the broader celebration of Prince Philip's remarkable life and achievements. The civilian dress code, initially seen by some as a disappointment, began to be viewed as an appropriate reflection of Philip's own preference for substance over style, achievement over appearance. The morning of Prince Philip's funeral dawned crisp and clear, with spring sunlight filtering through the ancient windows of St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. Inside the chapel, the absence of military uniforms among the royal family members created a strikingly different visual atmosphere than anyone had expected. The sea of black mourning dress, while solemn and appropriate, marked a profound departure from the colorful military pageantry that had characterized royal funerals for generations. Queen Elizabeth sat alone in the front pew, a small, dignified figure in black, her face partially hidden beneath a black veil. At 95, she bore the weight of both personal grief and public duty with the same quiet strength that had defined her 69-year reign. The sight of her solitary figure, separated from her family due to COVID-19 restrictions, became one of the most poignant images of the entire ceremony. Prince Charles, wearing a simple black mourning coat rather than his Admiral of the Fleet uniform, sat with his wife Camilla, both maintaining the composed dignity expected of their positions. The absence of military decorations and ceremonial swords created a more intimate, family-focused atmosphere that seemed to honor Prince Philip's preference for substance over spectacle. Prince William and Prince Harry, dressed identically in black suits, walked together behind their grandfather's coffin in a carefully choreographed procession that avoided placing them directly side by side. The decision to require civilian dress had eliminated one potential source of awkwardness, as questions about military honors and precedents had been rendered moot by the universal dress code. The Duke of Edinburgh's coffin was draped with his personal standard and topped with his naval cap, sword, and a wreath of flowers chosen by the Queen. These military symbols served as the primary visual reminders of his distinguished naval career, while the family's civilian dress emphasized their role as mourners rather than representatives of military tradition. Prince Andrew walked with his siblings, his own distinguished military service unmarked by uniform or decoration. For a man whose naval career had included genuine heroism during the Falklands conflict, the absence of military recognition might have been seen as a slight. However, the universal nature of the dress code meant that his situation was no different from that of his brothers or nephews, creating a sense of equality that would have been impossible under traditional protocol. The service itself was a masterpiece of restrained emotion and carefully chosen tributes. The Dean of Windsor spoke of Prince Philip's unwavering devotion to duty, his support for the Queen, and his countless contributions to British society through his patronages and the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme. The military aspects of his life were honored, but they were presented as part of a broader tapestry of service rather than as the defining element of his identity. The Archbishop of Canterbury delivered a tribute that emphasized Philip's role as a modernizer and innovator, someone who had helped guide the monarchy through decades of social and technological change. The absence of military uniforms seemed to reinforce this message, suggesting a royal family capable of adapting ancient traditions to meet contemporary needs. Outside the chapel, representatives of the military organizations that Philip had supported throughout his life stood at attention in their dress uniforms. The contrast between their formal military appearance and the family civilian dress served to highlight the separation between personal grief and public ceremony, allowing both to exist without conflict. The Duke's naval career was honored through the participation of Royal Navy personnel in the funeral procession and the presence of his naval cap and sword on the coffin. But perhaps the most meaningful tribute came from the presence of his family, united in grief despite their recent differences and controversies. Throughout the service, television cameras captured moments of genuine emotion that might have been overshadowed by the pageantry of military uniforms. Princess Anne's quiet tears, Prince Edward's protective presence beside his mother, and the careful distance maintained between Prince William and Prince Harry all became part of the story, being told about a family saying goodbye to their patriarch. The decision to forego military uniforms also meant that younger members of the royal family, including Prince William's children, could attend without feeling overwhelmed by military formality. The civilian dress code created a more accessible atmosphere that allowed for genuine displays of emotion and family connection. International observers noted the dignity and restraint of the ceremony, praising the royal family's ability to maintain tradition while adapting to extraordinary circumstances. The funeral was seen as a testament to both Prince Philip's legacy and the Queen's wisdom in managing complex family dynamics during a time of public scrutiny. The music chosen for the service reflected Philip's own preferences, including naval hymns and pieces that he had specifically requested. The absence of military fanfares and ceremonial music created space for more intimate and personal musical tributes that seemed to capture the essence of the man being honored. As the service concluded and the family processed out of the chapel, the sight of them walking together in their simple black clothing created a powerful image of unity and shared grief. The decision to require civilian dress had achieved exactly what the Queen had hoped. It focused attention on the family's love for Prince Philip rather than on the controversies and divisions that had dominated recent headlines. The burial that followed was private, attended only by the closest family members. Even in this most intimate setting, the civilian dress code was maintained, ensuring that Philip's final farewell remained focused on personal relationships rather than ceremonial obligations. The day demonstrated the monarchy's capacity for renewal and adaptation, showing that centuries-old institutions could respond to contemporary challenges without losing their essential dignity and purpose. The absence of military uniforms, initially seen by some as a diminishment of tradition, had instead created space for a more authentic and emotionally resonant farewell. As the royal family departed Windsor Castle that afternoon, many observers noted that the funeral had achieved something remarkable. It had honored Prince Philip's military service while celebrating his broader legacy, and it had allowed a family in crisis to come together in shared grief without the burden of ceremonial expectations that might have highlighted their divisions rather than their common love for the man they were mourning. In the weeks following Prince Philip's funeral, the full impact of Queen Elizabeth's decision regarding military uniforms became increasingly clear. What had initially been viewed by some as a controversial break with tradition was now being recognized as a masterful piece of royal statecraft that had achieved multiple objectives simultaneously. The immediate aftermath of the funeral saw a notable shift in media coverage of the royal family. Rather than focusing on controversies and divisions, news outlets found themselves writing about the dignity of the ceremony and the family's obvious love for Prince Philip. The absence of military uniforms had indeed prevented the media from creating hierarchical comparisons or focusing on individual status within the family structure. Royal historians began to analyze the decision within the broader context of Queen Elizabeth's reign, noting how she had consistently demonstrated an ability to adapt traditions when necessary while maintaining the monarchy's essential dignity. Professor Robert Lacey, a prominent royal biographer, observed that the funeral dress code represented the Queen at her most astute, showing that she understands when tradition must bow to contemporary wisdom. The decision also had unexpected consequences for how the royal family was perceived by younger generations. Social media analysis in the weeks following the funeral showed increased positive sentiment toward the monarchy among younger demographics, who appreciated what they saw as a more authentic and less hierarchical approach to royal ceremony. Prince William and Prince Harry's interaction during the funeral, while limited, had been noted by observers as more natural than their previous public encounters. The civilian dress code had eliminated one layer of formal protocol that might have emphasized their different positions within the royal hierarchy, allowing them to appear simply as grieving grandsons rather than representatives of competing royal factions. The international reaction to the funeral had been overwhelmingly positive, with many foreign leaders and media outlets praising the ceremony's dignity and restraint. The absence of military pageantry had been seen as particularly appropriate given the ongoing global challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, which had forced communities worldwide to reconsider traditional approaches to mourning and commemoration. European royal families took particular note of how the British monarchy had handled the delicate balance between honoring tradition and managing contemporary challenges. Several royal houses privately indicated that they would consider similar approaches when facing their own ceremonial dilemmas, recognizing the wisdom of prioritizing substance over spectacle when circumstances demanded it. The Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme, which had been highlighted during the funeral as one of Philip's greatest legacies, experienced a significant surge in applications and interest following the ceremony. Young people across the Commonwealth seemed inspired by the focus on Philip's civilian achievements and his role in encouraging personal development and adventure among the youth. Prince Charles, in his first public speech following his father's funeral, made specific reference to the ceremony's emphasis on service and dedication rather than rank and privilege. His comments were seen as a clear endorsement of his mother's decision and a signal that similar approaches might characterize his own eventual reign as king. The Queen's personal reflection on the funeral, shared privately with close advisors, revealed her satisfaction with how the ceremony had honored Philip's memory while maintaining family unity. She had particularly appreciated the lack of media controversy about uniforms and precedents, which had allowed the coverage to focus on Philip's achievements and character rather than family dynamics. Prince Andrew's presence at the funeral, while initially a source of concern among palace staff, had been managed successfully through the civilian dress code. His participation as a grieving son, rather than a decorated military officer, had avoided the potential public relations difficulties that might have arisen from traditional funeral protocol. The funeral also marked a significant moment in Prince Harry's relationship with his family. While no dramatic reconciliation occurred, the shared experience of mourning in civilian dress had created space for more natural family interactions than had been possible in the highly formal atmosphere of previous royal gatherings. Military organizations that had been associated with Prince Philip throughout his life expressed appreciation for how their connection to the Duke had been honored through the presence of his naval cap and sword on the coffin, even as the family chose civilian dress. This approach had acknowledged military tradition while adapting to contemporary circumstances. The decision's influence extended beyond the immediate royal family to affect how other British institutions approach the balance between tradition and adaptation. Several ceremonial organizations began reconsidering their own protocols, inspired by the monarchy's demonstration that meaningful change could be achieved without sacrificing dignity or respect. As the first anniversary of Prince Philip's death approached, planning for memorial events continued to reflect the principles established at his funeral. The emphasis on civilian achievement over military rank became a template for how the royal family would honor his ongoing legacy through various commemorative activities. The Queen's decision regarding military uniforms at Prince Philip's funeral would ultimately be remembered as one of the defining moments of her later reign, demonstrating her continued ability to navigate complex situations with wisdom and grace. It showed that even in her 90s, she retained the political instincts and family sensitivity that had served the monarchy so well throughout her decades on the throne. The funeral had achieved what many had thought impossible. It had honored a distinguished military veteran's service while transcending the controversies that might have overshadowed the ceremony. It had brought together a divided family and shared grief while maintaining the dignity essential to royal occasions. Most importantly, it had demonstrated that the monarchy could evolve and adapt while remaining true to its essential purpose of serving as a symbol of continuity and stability for the nation. In the broader context of royal history, Queen Elizabeth's decision would be seen as an example of leadership that put family welfare and institutional stability ahead of rigid adherence to protocol. It represented the kind of thoughtful modernization that had characterized her entire reign, showing that tradition could be honored even while being adapted to meet contemporary needs and challenges.